listening to Pop This, the podcast where three women talk about pop culture. Here are your hosts, Lisa Christiansen, Andrea Gin, and Andrea Warner.
So tell me this, if I'm the only person. Do you ever find something that you really like, whether it's like a makeup product, a beauty product, a shirt or something, and you just go and buy multiples of it?
No,
Yes.
I have heard of people doing that, and I think it's a great idea. But when it comes to it, I've never actually done that before. Have you?
Yeah, I ended up buying the same. I found this one shirt I really liked, and I bought all the colors in it. There was a navy blue, there was a pale blue, and then there was a white. And I just thought, I think this is the greatest shirt I've ever seen. And so I just bought it in all the colors. And recently I found this one cheap makeup that I think is so great. And I'm just tempted to go and buy all the colors. But then I think, should I do that? Or should I just be, always on the hunt for the better thing?
I noticed at the beginning of the pandemic, while trying to figure out whether I was going to redo my entryway, that I have a row of shoes that is now in an IKEA shoe thing, because I did redo my entryway, and they were all variations on the same color and shoe. So I had a whole bunch of black sort of Shabooties, and then a whole bunch of burgundy running shoes, and a whole bunch of yellow rain boots. And if you put them in a line, it's basically just, 2 years of my life just buying the same shoe over and over and over again. And it's comforting, but also I didn't know I was that predictable. So it was a little sad.
I worry about it sometimes, though, just because I'll watch a show like, remember when everyone was really into what not to wear, when they would get that somebody would horribly volunteer their tragic friend, and then they would go through their wardrobe and there would be like 10 of the most ghastly things ever. And they had this really great rationale as to why, look how cute this is. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, this is like the furthest thing from cute that I've ever seen. And so I do panic about that.
I mean, there is something that appeals to me about having a uniform. Like I've, seen profiles of people that have their styles so pulled together. They have like their 10 core pieces of their wardrobe, and they just have like different configurations. They can wear that to like, the office, to lunch, to going out for drinks, like they can just make it work. But I've never pulled it together enough to figure out what my 10 items would be.
Well, I would think, have they ever interviewed those people's children or loved ones? Because they're probably insufferable control freaks.
Wow. Okay. I was all like thinking, yeah, I mean, my fantasy would just be always to open up a cupboard and see like 10 of the same fantastic cashmere sweater, but in 10 different colors. Is that the same?
Yeah,
I was thinking of Zuckerberg and like the gray t-shirt and hoodie that is always the same. That's where I was going with that 10 core pieces look, although he's got 3 core pieces, I guess.
But I think it's more about like taking the time and effort out of having to dress yourself every day. Like you just have a couple options for each thing, and you know what they are, and you have them. So I guess in that sense, like having the same cashmere sweater and a bunch of different colors would serve that purpose.
Hasn't the pandemic basically done that for us in the last 20 months? I've been wearing the same workout clothes every single day because I don't really leave the house.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, well, I've got favorite sweatpants now. It's not just sweatpants.
These are the good ones.
It's like these are my really favorite ones.
Your Christmas dinner sweat.
And I just rotate. Just rotate,
Have either of you tried putting on hard pants?
Yes, it was very hard, actually. It was almost traumatizing. I was going to a movie and I couldn't conceivably see myself walking to the theater or taking, we were going to the VIP theater, so we had to take the transit, which was also my first time taking SkyTrain or Canada Line since last year. And it was strange to see other people also wearing hard pants and layers.
Is that what we call them now? Hard pants?
Well, they are. They're scratchy and they're not nearly as comfortable or as forgiving.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. There's the denim I like to buy has some Lycra in it, mostly.
You have to now. I find that like trying on, denim without any lycra in it at the store is so upsetting because you're like, this is like many sizes too small for me. It's because this fabric has absolutely zero stretch to it.
Yeah, it has to have a little bit. I mean, is that too lazy to suggest that your denim has some lycra? Please, Stephen, tell me it's not.
I don't think so. Not at all. It's not as much of an option for guys.
They don't
It's
put lycra
doable,
in it?
but not necessarily. No.
Oh.
So you don't get, because usually they're not, unless you're a hipster from 10 years ago, they're not super tight. So they tend to be, they're still rigid, I guess, compared to a jogging pant. But you'll find them with a little lycra, but it's not like every single pair has lycra. You've got to sort of look and see.
How is that comfortable?
Yeah.
It's not. That's why I'm wearing sweatpants right now, this very second, and have been for weeks, except for that one movie excursion.
So when I go to Uniqlo, almost every single pair of pants they make has some stretch in it. Are you saying if I went over to the men's department, that's not going to be the same?
Uniqlo might be a little different, but you're going to find more things without stretch in them, most probably.
I think you need to lead a revolution. Oh,
That's terrifying.
Oh, quite the segue.
thank you. Thank you. I'm Lisa Christiansen.
I'm Andrea Gin.
And I'm Stephen Schelling.
Yeah, sitting in for Andrea Warner, and thank you, or shall I say merci?
Vous êtes bienvenue, la bienvenue. It's wonderful to be here yet again, and we're talking about someone I really, really used to love. So it's exciting.
Are we talking about Sofia Coppola here, or are we talking?
No. In fact, more Marie Antoinette. I would say more than love. It was an obsession. It was a little 11, 12-year-old gay boy's obsession growing up.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
So-
then we'll get into that.
Yeah, so our regular listeners will probably recognize Stephen's voice because he's been guesting on many podcasts recently. You joined us for our musical series. We made you watch Xanadu, which
Yep.
I'm still sorry about.
Yeah, you should be. But I love you guys so much that I was willing to come back.
And then you also were on Funny Girl and Cabaret.
And we
Which
appreciated
stronger,
all of
much
it all the
stronger than
time.
Xanadu. Xanadu is still the low water point, the ebb of our relationship as guest podcaster and hosts.
So Stephen is a writer, fashion stylist, PR executive, professional gadabout, and our resident expert in everything French
Ooh la la.
And royalty
and royalty.
That too, yeah.
and history.
Yikes. I
Just
definitely have a
everything.
niche.
We really don't know what we're doing without you. In fact, I think
No.
that's fair to say.
I know. I am so glad that you are joining us to talk about this movie because, frankly, like I had never seen it before. And when I watched it for the first time yesterday, I felt quite lost. Like I need somebody to tell me why this movie's good or not good.
Or not.
as it were.
Yes.
I don't know if I got it at all.
You
But
would
anyway.
be like many of the people who originally saw it and have seen it since. Have felt very much the same way.
Lisa, do you want to read the background of the movie?
Sure. Yes, I will. Marie Antoinette is a 2006 historical drama film written and directed by Sofia Coppola. It is based on the life of Queen Marie Antoinette, played by Kirsten Dunst, in the years leading up to the French Revolution. It won the Academy Award for Best Costume Design.
Okay, that part I get. The costumes in this film were exquisite,
And the food styling.
and the food
It was
styling.
right up there with it. It was a lush film. Lush
There's
from
no
beginning to end.
arguing that. There's no arguing that. I don't know if I've ever seen, more detailed, beautiful costuming on film. Okay, so I'll read the synopsis, which was quite controversial in our group when I sent it out. But Stephen, you can comment on that afterwards. Okay. When the Austrian-born Marie Antoinette is handed off at the tender age of 14 to the French aristocracy in an arranged political marriage to Prince Louis Auguste, soon to be King Louis the 16th,
16th.
she's stripped of everything and everyone she holds dear. Repackaged as quote unquote fully French so as not to offend the oh so delicate sensibilities of the Versailles court, she weds Louis in a grand ceremony and then sees very little of him outside their official appearances. The two sleep in the same bed, but their marriage is not consummated for 7 years, much to the despair of Antoinette's mother and the chagrin of Louis's grandfather. An heir to the French throne is desperately desired, and when an arranged marriage such as this one fails to yield that precious son, then the people of the land wonder, what is the point after all? When Marie becomes queen and begins to empty the country's royal coffers on personal frivolities, the people stop whispering and wondering and start shouting for her head. And that is from Plugged In. Now, Stephen, you wanted to dispute this synopsis, so why don't we just start with that?
Yeah, I would dispute she becomes queen and she's robbing the coffers. She was profligate with her money, and it is mentioned in the movie, France was broke because they backed America in America's revolution. So they paid for America's revolution and sent soldiers and money. And that's why France was broke. It wasn't because the queen spent too much on a dress. The amount of money she spent paled in comparison to how much money they were sending out. And also, by the time she originally had her daughter first and then her son, she actually was quite loved when she first had children. It was later, as the revolution started to happen, that people started to really hate her and public opinion turned on her really quickly. And that's partially because of the advent of the tabloid press in France. So fake news, if you want to hashtag it, was kind of what brought her down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, you get the sense in watching this movie that Sofia Coppola is trying to draw some kind of parallel into like celebrity culture of today, or when she made the movie in 2006, which was like, the height of the Paris Hilton, kind of Lindsay Lohan kind of fame. And to Marie Antoinette being a similar teenage celebrity of her time.
Very much so. I was a fashion writer when it came out. And I think one of the reasons the movie didn't do that well is the marketing campaign behind it was almost exclusively towards, the set of girls who liked Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan. That's who was supposed to go see this movie. And then even Anna Wintour tried with I think it was an 8-page spread shot at Versailles of Kirsten Dunst and all these dresses. But it didn't really appeal because it had gone too young for maybe the audience that would have embraced it. And it was just marketed as bubblegum. And I remember the first time I saw it, because I think the paper I was writing for was premiering it in Vancouver. And I was there for the premiere. And I actually was like, oh, this isn't bad. It wasn't great, but it certainly wasn't bad. But it definitely plays up the idea in history that Marie Antoinette was sort of an airhead and was just flitting about, which it's not necessarily untrue at that period. And I think Sofia Coppola said something like, I wanted to just point out that she was a young teenage girl growing up with no one to tell her no. And, this is what was happening. And while that is an interesting idea, it might not be the most interesting part of her life to document in a film, from my opinion.
Being a Marie Antoinette expert.
Yeah, I wouldn't say expert, but definitely someone who was obsessed with her and knows a bit about her. More than your average person on the street. Maybe that's fair. Yeah, I know a little bit more than your average person about her.
Elisa, had you seen this movie before?
This is my third time seeing it.
Oh.
So, yeah. But I'm a big Sofia Coppola fan.
Right.
So I definitely, I saw it in the theater and I didn't hate it. I liked the approach that she was taking. I liked Kirsten Dunst. I liked the feeling it gave of her isolation, her seclusion, her complete surprise that anyone would be thinking about what she's doing at all, because she had one job and she wasn't able to achieve it. And I think, who amongst us wouldn't go on a spending spree if our husband is not interested in us? I think that's why I watch The Real Housewives. That's what happens. So no, I actually quite liked this movie when I first saw it, and I liked it even more seeing it for the third time. Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah.
You don't have to apologize. You like the movie.
Well,
like
I mean, I was not really necessarily thinking too much about the history, which she does do. I mean, there are those moments where Steve Coogan is trying to buy the way. We've got this situation in Poland, and she's all, Poland? Okay. I've got some new dresses coming. I mean, I don't think that there was, unless you can fill in the blanks, I didn't get a sense that she had some access to higher education or was a world political strategist that, I didn't get a sense that, she was brought in when they rolled out the map and put little pieces all over the place, and she went, wait, I've got an idea. We'll run out the flank on the side. I didn't get a sense that she was involved in anything other than trying to fill time, which is what looked like her life really was, filling time.
Her tutor actually said when she was, I guess, 13, he was sent to Austria to get her ready. And he said, she's absolutely delightful, but a terrible student. And, he was speaking in diplomatic way, but she had horrible handwriting. She couldn't really speak French. She couldn't speak any language really other than Austrian German. And it was a bit of a disaster at first. She was just really flighty. And, she was the youngest child of, I think her mom had 15 kids. And her mom was busy being an empress. And her dad was busy being the Holy Roman Emperor, because they had separate kingdoms. So it was, she probably didn't get a lot of people looking over her shoulder, making her do her homework. So she just was very flighty, and she just loved pretty things. And
Which I think Kirsten Dunst did a really good job of portraying.
But by the time that they're leaving, and there's that one scene where she's sitting next to Louis and they're talking about maybe the queen should go, and she's like, I refuse to go. By then, she was actually one of his most trusted advisors. Unfortunately, all of her advice is what got them killed. So she wasn't very good at it, but Louis trusted her.
Yeah. Well, she definitely did a good job of showing their relationship change. With her saying, when they were saying, well, you need to go into hiding. And she's like, no, my place is beside my king. So their relationship did change.
Died in the wool monarchist. Like, she really believed France was thinking of moving towards a constitutional monarchy, sort of on the British level or the English level at that time. And she was staunchly against it and was like, no, you are ordained by God. You're supposed to be a sole ruler. Get that out of your mind. And that's kind of, that was her, I guess, hill to die on. And she did die on that hill. So at least she stayed true to herself.
So that's the bad advice she gave? Louis was considering it?
Well, they had considered it. And so they brought it to him, the Estates General, and he was like, oh, maybe. And she was like, oh, no. God didn't put you on earth to share power with peasants. We are above all of this. And she was, and this is in the histories, whether it's true or not, or who can say, because there's a lot that was written about it that wasn't true. But she put it in his ear that this was not acceptable. And he stood by that. And he probably had other advisors doing the same thing too. But he stood by that and lost his head. And then a few months later, she followed him up the staircase to the guillotine.
I feel like if there had been a voice track of Steven talking over this movie and explaining all this and filling in the story and the background and historical facts, I would have appreciated what was going on a lot more, because
didn't you just like seeing all the clothes and Jamie Dornan? I didn't even know who he was then. Now he's
Jamie Dornan.
Now he's Jamie Dornan, yeah.
For 15 minutes, yes. But it was like over a 2-hour movie, and it just felt like, it seems like a really long Vogue fashion shoot. And I think
it was one of the criticisms of it at the time. It was just a photo shoot that was on film.
Yeah, and I was like, I guess I'm I guess I'm gonna have to look at Wikipedia and read about like what's actually happening at this time and fill in some blanks and try to figure this out, or wait for Stephen to explain it to me.
It felt like some stuff got edited. We went really, 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 really slow, and then all of a sudden, boom, revolution. What? Like, it felt like it sped up really quickly in the last half hour.
I mean, most of the movie to me seemed it's just like, scenes of them eating fancy cake.
Yeah,
in the palace.
She was maybe at an hour and a half, and she only had half an hour left, but she had to get to the part, which is the only reason we know who she is, right? There would be no reason, like, name another queen of France.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly. There's a reason you only know her in terms of queens of France, but generally in terms of, name 5 famous queens. Most are going to be British because France couldn't have queens. You had consorts who were the consort of the king because they had a law that a woman couldn't rule. So you don't get the stories of queens of France. They're not, and even in France, they don't really teach that. Well,
ironically, I think the only other woman I can say that I do know in history is Josephine.
Right. Who, was an empress and was, famously Napoleon's first wife, not the one that he had a child with, but the one that he had to divorce so he could have a child. And that didn't work out very well for him in the end. But Josephine actually has more heads of state and rulers and royalty. There's no more royalty there's more royalty in the world that's descended from her than anybody else.
Really?
Even more than Queen Victoria. Yep. She even beats Queen Victoria.
How
she
is
had
that
kids. She had kids before she married Napoleon. Oh. And they got really good marriages.
You're a kid. Wow. I did not know that.
Good old Josephine.
So, Stephen, you told us that you were like between the ages of 11 and 12, you believed that you were the reincarnation of Marie Antoinette. Can you explain that to us?
I can't even explain it to myself, but I was absolutely obsessed with her and convinced that I was her reincarnated. I think I'd learned about reincarnation, sometime around then. And I think I learned about her around the same time. And the two kind of clicked together. But I was convinced I was like making paper crowns for myself and wearing towels as capes. And it's embarrassing to even consider some of the things I did. But I was absolutely convinced that I was the decapitated Queen of France. And then I think that year, we also spent quite a bit of that year in France, which didn't help. So I got to go around to all these places that she had lived. So I think it reinforced in my mind that I was indeed her. And I think there was also an Enya song out at that time about a woman who goes to some house and realizes she's lived there before. So everything was just coming together. And I was absolutely convinced in my little 11-year-old mind that I was the reincarnation of a French queen. Now I'm just a regular old French queen, I guess. But, I didn't yet know that.
So how do you know for sure you're not?
Well, I don't know for sure that I'm not. However, at my age now, there are many other figures in history that I would prefer to be the reincarnation of. Even there are more French queens that I would prefer to be a reincarnation of. Ones that actually did stuff would be cool. But what
was it? What was it about Marie Antoinette that really appealed to you at that age?
I don't know. I think I would like to think that maybe it was around the time of the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution. So there was a lot of stuff going on, but this was even 5 years before that. But I think there was a book that my mom had bought me about French history, like a graphic novel, and she was in it. And that was the most glamorous period, not with the head chopping, but just before the head chopping, that was when the dresses were their biggest, the hair was its biggest, that whole, and it was an aesthetic that existed in the 80s too, shoulder pads, big hair, too much makeup. So maybe that's what appealed to me. I don't know. I do remember being absolutely convinced and even telling schoolmates that I was the
Oh.
reincarnate. Yeah.
Oh, that must
it
have
was
made
bad.
you really popular.
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, there wasn't much I could have done to be less popular, let's be honest, at the time. But, whew, yeah. I shared that, and now that I look back at it, I'm blushing for myself. And in person, doing it right now, you can't tell because it's dark in this room. But blush, blush, blush. Yeah.
Oh, we can feel it. We can feel it.
Welcome to my crazy preteen years.
Do you think it was something too about her tragedy? I mean, there's nothing. Yeah.
Possibly, yeah. And I don't think I understood who she was. I understood the comic book, literally a comic book version of who she was. And she wasn't somebody that was super popular in France or in North America at the time. Her image hadn't started to be rehabilitated. So, I mean, I don't know how I got there. I just know that it was a caricature of her that I was really into. And as I got older, learned more, and then, she became less interesting. And there are others that I've always going to find more interesting, and that was the thing. I think and maybe that colored my interpretation or my viewing of the movie. But I think the movie there's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfectly fun little campy film. I don't think it, and she wasn't going for gravitas. Sofia Coppola, I would assume, was not going for gravitas. So why was I even looking for it? But again, as I've said throughout the pandemic, whatever makes you happy is okay. So if you like the film and you just want to look at pretty dresses and like a costume party, and the costume party is pretty cool too. There is a costume party on top of it being a costume party of a movie. So you get the double dipping of fun escapism. She didn't get to escape.
I have to say, I really enjoyed the soundtrack. I know it's unconventional, but at the time, I mean, I think that is one great opening sequence too. Just that her looking at the camera. I love that. I just think that's so clever. I love the whole sort of nod that, all right, everyone, buckle up, because this isn't going to be your regular period drama.
Well, you're also really, as you said, a huge fan of Sofia Coppola's. What is it that you like about her work?
I like the kind of calm aesthetic that she always has. But it's also a little bit, it's always sad. There's always a deep sadness to all of her characters, that there's something missing. And I recognize that I don't necessarily identify with all of these very privileged people. But there's something I identify with about that tone and that mood that she sets. And I think that I love the way her films look. And I love it's the same sort of reason I really love a filmmaker like Wes Anderson. I love the fact that I'm with someone who really cares about every detail. The songs, the hair, every single thing is going to be important. And I feel that when I'm watching her movies.
Yeah, I mean, like, she's a really great stylist. Like, you can see she has a distinct look to all of her films. And I know, like, Sofia Coppola, like, she's basically like our age, a contemporary, and I know that, like, she's a cool style icon person of our time. But there's something about her films that I just they don't stay with me. Like, they're just, it's like I'm watching pretty pictures and then it floats away. And she also, I find that she makes, I mean, this has been like a criticism of her work, but she's just like, all of her stories are very concerned with the point of view of privileged white women. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't really sort of, throughout like her career of making movies, hasn't really gone outside that sort of point of view. Like, she has very few characters in her film that are, people of color and like not white characters in the film. And especially, with The Beguiled that was released in, was it 2017, I think? But yeah, like, just kind of wanting, I mean, it's also like, well documented about how that story is based on a book that she adapted for film and then decided to write out, the African-American character in the film because she wanted to focus on the point of view of the white women in the story. And so it's just like those things that make me wonder, like, because, she is still young. She's a person of these times about like why she isn't kind of attempting to expand her point of view or, to keep up with the times in terms of like understanding, I don't know, society, people, like it's curious to me, but maybe we'll see it. Maybe the next decade of movies we'll see her. And frankly, I find that not just with her films, but with Wes Anderson too, whom I, have been a great fan of his films. Like I loved Rushmore when it came out. I love Bottle Rocket. I love those films, but I'm just finding as time passes, I'm like, why
They're
aren't
making
you
the same movie over
Yeah,
and
like-
over again? Yeah.
Yeah.
I could agree with all of it. In fact, I was trying to just think, is there a Wes Anderson movie that I can remember in my head, like remember scenes of all the way through? Not really. I enjoy watching them, and I think I enjoy watching them, like seeing the visual of them more than actually the movie aspect. And maybe that's the same with Marie Antoinette, but it's true. It is very much, they're auteurs, but to the point where they're pretty much, both of them tell their story, and it's the same story. And if you like that story, then it's great, and you're going to enjoy the next one because you liked the first one. Kind of like, I don't know, if you go and look at 80s music, if you like one Smiths song, chances are you're going to like all the songs by the Smiths.
Whoa.
I love them, but I'm saying it's true.
Wow.
The jangle guitar on every song, it's coming, and you're going to love it.
Okay.
Ooh, controversial.
Wow, that seemed to hurt her more than
Wow.
critiquing Sofia Coppola.
Yeah, hit a solid spot. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I mean, yeah, like I will say just the last point on Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola is just that like the movies where they're set in other places, like I haven't rewatched Lost in Translation recently, so I can't really talk about, but I have been aware of like the criticism around how Japanese people are treated in the movie, like they're stereotyped and they're not the characters that have inner lives or are complex characters. They're just kind of othered in that movie. And I think that criticism has come up with Wes Anderson movies, like with Isle of Dogs, which is an animated movie, and you would think like, what? But like, I don't know if either of you have seen Isle of Dogs, but it's set in Japan, but none of the dogs are Japanese. They're all like speaking English, or like they're all speaking dog, which is translated into English. And then there's like the hero of the story is like a white girl. And it's just this thing where it's just like, yes, they do have this point of view, which they are kind of rigidly holding on to and not really kind of trying to update themselves for, the times that we're living in. And I find that a bit odd because they're such icons in the film world, especially, for people of our generation.
I
Maybe
don't
that's their
disagree with any
privilege.
of that.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the ultimate in privilege, is being able to be an artist who doesn't have to, do anything except what your internal monologue. People are willing to listen and pay for your internal monologue, and you don't have to change it. It's maybe The Smiths is not a good example. Maybe more of a Jack Nicholson thing, right? It doesn't matter what movie or what part, quote unquote, Jack Nicholson's playing. He's always playing Jack Nicholson playing a part.
Well, having just seen The French Dispatch,
Thoughts?
I don't think I would recommend it to someone who didn't really like him. I don't think that would be your gateway into the world of Wes Anderson. I would probably tell someone to watch The Royal Tenenbaums or The Life Aquatic first. Just, for my sensibilities. And I've seen, I haven't seen Isle of Dogs because Wes Anderson likes to kill dogs off in movies, and I hate that. So I'm not going to see a whole movie about dogs. There's no way. I don't want to see any dogs dying. I don't do well with that at all.
Agreed.
I go to that website called Does the Dog Die? Just so I can check.
I made a mistake once and did not check it on a film, thinking, of course, it's that's not going to happen. And that movie did have a dog die, and I luckily it was at the end of the film, but it soured the movie.
Yeah, no
for
kidding.
me.
I will turn that movie off as soon as I see a dog I look it up. I gotta know. But yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the things you said. I guess I just it's something that I would like. I think I have those movies now, so I agree. It's time to make some different ones. It's time now that you've got some new information. However, I would still like to see that same aesthetic because that is why I like them as filmmakers.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen, how did you feel about this film in terms of telling the story of Marie Antoinette?
Well, you guys know that when we first started having our little historical film chats, I had a huge problem with anything that was anachronistic, and this movie possibly was one of the first ones to just throw the anachronisms out and be like, deal with it. And then subsequent movies have, felt freer to play a little more fast and loose and have fashion montages in an 80s sense and have soundtracks that don't work and have, in The Favorite, we had the odd breakdancing scene. Doesn't always work, but I don't have a problem with it from a historical point of view. It was relative, it cleaved pretty close to the truth. She did write out, I guess it was to make Marie Antoinette seem even more isolated. She did have two best friends, and you'd never know that and they hated each other, but you would never know that if you had watched, maybe she saved that for her next movie, The Bling Ring, and then she had all the friends hanging out together. But, if she was trying to do more of a Mean Girls thing, that would have been a great entryway because there was two best friends who were plotting against each other. One was like the nice one and one was the exciting one. And they were constantly fighting for her attention. And the exciting one won, I guess you could say, in the end. And she got to die of, I think, tuberculosis in Switzerland, whereas the nice one had her head chopped off and they carried it around on a pike outside of Marie Antoinette's prison so she could see her friend's head on a pike.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. See, I'm not going to say I needed to see any of that in this movie. I think it ended just in the right place.
Most Antoinette movies don't get to the really, really sad part that kind of cut off when she was in prison. And when they would beat her son so that she could hear his screams, they tend to not show the really, really bad parts of it because
what happened to her children?
Well, her son, quote, died in prison. He was Louis the 17th when his dad was beheaded, and he was beaten in prison and died of, I think they said it was, the flu or the flux or whatever. But apparently the jailers were really, really awful to him. And
he was just a little boy, right?
Yeah, he was a 7 or 8 year old.
Yeah.
And then her daughter, who was her firstborn, ended up getting to England after the revolution and lived in England and never had any children. So she was, and she sort of the line, that side of the line ended with her. And then you have all the two crazy brothers of Louis who tried to reestablish the monarchy one after the other.
Right.
So
there are some descendants around.
Not of Marie Antoinette. So right. I guess you could say there's probably some descendants through her brothers and sisters, but no one descended from her and Louis the 16th. It's all from Louis's brothers or her brothers and sisters, of which there were many. Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a really sad end. It did not go well.
Yeah.
And so you can understand why the movie sort of cuts when they're forced to go to Paris, and she gets to look at the spoiler alert on a movie we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes, and it's quite old. She looks out the carriage window and she gets to look at the Great Fountain again one last time with the sun either rising or setting. I'm not sure which. And it's as good a place as any, I think, to stop. And most films tend to stop there. Around that time, they don't follow them back to Paris unless you really want to get into basically the maudlin and revolutionary and head choppy offy parts.
Yeah.
I mean,
not to be a downer.
I kind of wanted to go back to your point about anachronisms in the movie, because it's clear that this movie has been influential on period movies, like the most recent obvious example being Bridgerton. And so, Stephen, have you seen Bridgerton? How do you feel about that?
I started watching it because weren't we all? watching it.
Yeah,
when it came
yeah.
out.
Yes.
And I stopped, and it wasn't for the anachronisms or the general silliness. I found it almost too soapy for me. It was too quick. Everything was too quickly resolved, and there was no stakes. It was almost like a goofy comedy with hot people in Regency clothing, which nothing wrong with that. But I didn't. There was no substance, and I guess when something like The Favorite at least had. It was anachronistic and it wasn't faithful to the period, but it also had this really dark humor that was an undercurrent of the whole thing. And Bridgerton just, and maybe the same with Marie Antoinette, there was no anchor. There was nothing, to hold it in place.
Have you seen The Great with Elle Fanning?
Yes, I also didn't finish that. That was the height of my anachronism period. I think that was the last gasp. My friend Derek was saying it was hilarious. You've got to watch it. I watched the first episode. It's like, none of it happened this way. And I had a little bit of a breakdown with him on the phone. He had to listen to me talk he had to talk me down. But then I watched the rest, some more of it, and I never finished it. And I might go back to it. But I liked it in terms of it was fun to watch. But I don't know that it carried over enough in all the episodes to keep me interested.
Yeah, but it feels like Sofia Coppola's movie is like the sort of grandmother of all these movies that are now kind of like using like a modern music pastiche, and kind of taking like sort of re-envisioning like these different eras of time in sort of different ways. And it's kind of impressive.
I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right with that. I know that when it came out in France, France takes culture super seriously. I don't know if you guys know this, but they take their culture like really like they have primetime shows where people just talk to each other about books. Like the number one show. I swear to God. So they take it super seriously. And when this came out, when Marie Antoinette came out, the soundtrack really got a lot of people riled up, because they felt it was disrespectful and that she'd been given such access to Versailles to film in. And I believe she was one of the first non-French directors ever to be given this level of access. And so there were a lot of cultural, lions of the French patrimony who thought that she had, she twisted the knife. And so it was very...
Because like it was shown at Cannes and then wasn't it booed? Isn't that like the story of this movie?
Possible. That would not surprise me.
Yeah.
I think that there might have been a bit of a loosening since then. But at the time, and even now, I mean, again, they take culture they have like public intellectual is not a joke. That's an actual job title in France. You can be a public intellectual, which means you just talk about what you think on TV,
right,
all the time.
I love that idea so much.
Yeah.
I used to always say that, we had hockey riots here in Vancouver, but I would like to riot just because we didn't win the Booker Prize. I would just like to go outside and just, overturn some oil cans full of fire and just, no, if Margaret Atwood doesn't win.
I like the idea. I just don't know that Booker Prize devotees have the temperament to riot.
They don't. But I'm just suggesting how great it would be.
But they could dream about it and write a really good story about people rioting because of the Booker Prize.
I would just like to be angry smoking and someone go, "What's wrong?" And I'd be, "Did you see who won the Governor General Awards? I mean, that novel was crap. You know what I'm saying? It is crap, and I am going to be moody for the day. So deal with it,
With the smoking and that hand gesture, I mean, all you need to do is say it in French and talk about the Goncourt Prize, and you will fit right in.
I can't wait. Yeah.
So, Stephen, how is Marie Antoinette seen in France today? Like, do they still see her as like this evil queen person?
No, I don't think so. There's been a definite change, especially since, believe it or not, it's ridiculous, but Jane Seymour played her in a 1989 TV movie that was like an event. It was on the anniversary of the 200th anniversary of the Revolution. So Jane Seymour played Marie Antoinette, and I think that because she was beamed into everybody's house, and Jane Seymour played her as, the queen and a mother and not a bad person, I think it started to change opinions. Again, this thing was huge. They even dubbed it into English. I think it ran in North America as well. And then historians have been looking at it, and she's been getting some much better press, I think. She's not being ignored anymore. This movie being obviously proof of that, but attitudes are changing. There are still the weird monarchists in France who they wear a pin with her face on it to say like never again type of situation.
Really?
Like everywhere, it takes all kinds. But I think she's getting a slightly better review. However, I don't know if she's ever going to get a full pardon, I guess you could say. If you go to Paris, one of the big tourist attractions is in the Jardin du Luxembourg, which is the Luxembourg Gardens. There are 20 statues of famous queens of France, right? So you would think the most famous queens would be there, since there's many more than 20 queens of France in history. And there's only two that are missing, two main ones, and that's Marie Antoinette and Catherine de Medici. And Catherine de Medici still hasn't gotten her day of, her pardon from history. So they're still, I think, in some ways considered on that level. They're the ones that, they're also the most famous ones. So maybe that's why you don't talk about them. But I think it's softening, but I don't think she's ever going to be fully, I think people understand the tragedy of it better now, but I don't think she'll be exonerated. I mean, she was guilty of being the queen. So you can't get out of that.
Right.
It gives you dresses. It takes your head. I mean,
exactly. You know, she had a good run. She had a good run while she was there.
So how old was she when she died?
In her 30s, I think, but don't quote me on that. I cannot remember, but she was relatively young.
Yeah.
I'm going to maybe her 30s. But by the time she was, because they took her to the guillotine in a cart drawn by a donkey. So the king got a coach and horses. They put her in a forester's cart with a donkey pulling it through the streets of Paris. And her hair had turned, her natural hair, because very few people had ever seen it because she always wore wigs, other than her intimates. Her hair had turned white, and it was pushed up under a cap so that it wouldn't stop the blade. So she would, mercifully, she would die faster. But she had aged considerably. She looked like a woman in her 50s. There's only one drawing of her, a famous drawing. It was done of quickly, almost a caricature. And it's a couple of lines, and it's her in the back of this donkey-drawn carriage. And you can find it online if you're so inclined. But she was, a shell of her former self, obviously, after being imprisoned and having her husband killed and her son tortured in the next room. So it was pretty bad. But before that, she was quite happy. So
there were lots of great things going on.
Take the sugar and the salt and together, I guess, is Marie Antoinette's story.
Is there a book or movie about Marie Antoinette that you would recommend?
So glad you asked. Yes. And I had to rewatch part of it just today, just to remember if it was really as good as I thought it was. And it is called, in English, it's called Farewell, My Queen. And it's Diane Kruger plays Marie Antoinette in it. But the actual main character is one of her servants. And she's played by Léa Seydoux, who you might know as James Bond's baby mama, I guess.
And
would be
also
the most
in
recent.
the new French Dispatch.
There you go. She's having a renaissance, I guess. So this was done 2012. And it's all sort of, if you're familiar with, let's say, Upstairs, Downstairs, the British show, it's sort of the same thing, whereas Marie Antoinette was all about Marie Antoinette and royalty. This movie's all about the people that make it function behind the scenes. So you're in the back corridors, and she is just crazily devoted to the queen. And the movie starts on the day that the Bastille was taken. So it starts on July 14th. And then it moves through the successive days until the queen has to leave and is taken to Paris. So it's a really interesting, it's sort of the next level of the story that you don't see in Marie Antoinette.
Right. Farewell, My Queen?
Yes, Farewell, My
Okay.
Queen, or Les Adieux à la Reine in French. I believe that the version that you'll find in North America, Diane Kruger dubbed her own lines into English, but everybody else, it's not the greatest dubbing. So if you have the choice of going for subtitles, I'd probably do that.
And where can you find it?
I found it online. I own it, but I also found it online. I can't remember where though. I think it was on Amazon, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I did see it on the internets though.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's an interesting film, and it's not as the costumes obviously aren't as grand because it's mostly about people who work and live below stairs, but it's super interesting in that sense. And you get an even more intimate look at like Trianon, where Marie Antoinette, her little getaway, that little house that Louis gives her to get away.
I went there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Really?
really cool.
Yeah.
That place is cool.
Yeah, it is.
And you go upstairs, there's sort of a second floor that's in between the two floors, and you actually get to see that in this movie. So if you're an architecture buff and you're into stuff like that, then this movie's also good for that.
I did enjoy the scenes at that summer cottage where they were playing like kind of make believe farm life.
It's an amazing little place. It's so odd, but it's spectacular.
It really is. And she used to, it's true that she did have this little farm created, and all of the eggs were washed before the queen found them so that she wouldn't have to see anything dirty on them. All of the goats were washed and shampooed and brushed and had ribbons put on daily. And it was just this sort of, this whole fairy tale of living as a little farm girl.
Wow.
Where's the siren? Who's got the siren?
I think that's me.
Oh.
Sorry. My neighborhood's just, it's gone downhill,
hoppin'.
I guess. It's a hopping. Yeah, things are happening.
So everybody, do we think that Sofia Coppola's version of Marie Antoinette's story, does it pop?
Well, yeah. I mean, it might not be historically accurate or as accurate as it could be, but in terms of a good movie, I think it's a good movie.
I think it's a perfectly reasonable way to spend a Saturday night if you're not going out, or a weekday night. I'll give it a lukewarm pop.
I was gonna give it a no pop, but I'll give it a lukewarm pop based on our conversation because I feel like
a lot of fizz in that bottle, more of a.
I feel like I now understand more of the story thanks to Stephen, but
yeah,
I just found it really long and it's slow, and maybe I just wasn't in the mood for watching something like that. Like I wanted some narrative. I wanted some dialogue. I wanted some story, but that's not Sophia's style. So
no.
I'm asking for too much.
So yeah, I mean, I think that always comes sometimes with a caveat that if you like her or you like this, a different type of filmmaking, then you will like it. But since I do, I can give it a pop, an enthusiastic pop, pop, pop. There you go.
Fair.
Okay, so we like to end our podcasts with stuff we recommend. Stephen, as our guest, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. I've been hoping to be able to recommend. I've been recommending this to everybody I know. So it's a person, actually. Her name is Dr. Eleanor Yanega, and she is I guess you could say a bit of as we mentioned earlier, a public intellectual. She's a medieval scholar and TV host and author. Anyway, you can find her online. It's under, what is her handle is Going Medieval on Twitter. And she has a blog called Going Medieval. She just wrote, it's kind of a Renaissance period for her, pun intended. She just wrote a book called The Middle Ages, a graphic history. And it's kind of a graphic novel about the Middle Ages. And she also has a podcast called We're Not So Different, where she and a non-historian talk about history and things, how we're not very different from people 1,000 years ago. and she's just super interesting. And I found her because I'm a big fan of BBC history documentaries. I know you're shocked. You're shocked to hear this, but I am. And there was a bit of a breakup at BBC, and one of their lead presenters started his own history network where he's producing his own shows. And they brought her in. She's a professor at the London School of Economics, and she specializes in medieval sexuality, apocalypse, women's issues. And she's this foul-mouthed, 6-foot-tall American woman who just is blowing up the British history documentary scene. And she's just such a breath of fresh air, and I love her.
And how did you spell her last name?
Janega.
Jan.
Ega. Yanega.
Yanega, okay.
And she's amazing, and she'll throw sort of American expressions in and just befuddle the British people she's interviewing or speaking with, and it's fun. She's sort of crumpling up the gentility that usually comes with those BBC documentaries that are also great that if you're trying to fall asleep, they really help as well. But hers keep you awake, and they're fun.
Wow. Sounds like a discovery. I'm going to have to check that out. Lisa, what's your recommendation?
Boy, oh boy, on the other side of the spectrum, we have season 11 or 12 of Curb Your Enthusiasm just started. There's only 2 episodes in, and I, for some reason, find watching Curb Your Enthusiasm very relaxing. There's something about the mundaneness of Larry David's life, of just watching him go to a restaurant, fight with people. I have become a lot more petty over the pandemic. Everything bugs me so much more than it ever has. And I find that it's just really hitting the sweet spot for me. So there's only 2 episodes out now. They're out every weekend. And I'm happy to have it back.
And what platform is it on?
Crave. HBO Crave.
Excellent. I wanted to recommend, this is kind of an old thing, but it's from 2007, but I watched it for the first time the other day. It's called Persepolis. It's an animated film by Marjan Satrapi.
Oh, I remember this. Yes.
Yeah. I had read the graphic novel, which came out in 2000, a long time ago. But I'd never watched the animated film for some reason, and I just watched it for the first time the other day. And so for those who don't know, it's about a girl growing up in Iran and Austria during the Islamic Revolution. And it's a very funny, moving, and it just it's a great story, and it'll stay with you for a long time. And it sort of it depicts a world that you don't often see in comics. And so I highly recommend it. It's available somewhere to view on viewing platforms because it's highly acclaimed. I think it even won an Oscar or was nominated for an Oscar.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's out there and available, but I'm glad I since I had read the graphic novel, I didn't need to watch the animated film, but the animated film is its own thing and stands up on its own, and you should see it.
I should rewatch it. I don't remember it, so I'm totally going to check it out.
Yeah. Agreed. So much to do, so much to see. And
it's all out there.
Well, luckily we still have time because we're still basically in a pandemic. So
yeah, basically. Yeah, it's still in one.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you talk to and what Twitter feed you follow. But yeah, we're definitely still in it.
We're still wearing comfy pants.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Stephen, and
oh my God, my pleasure.
For putting all of this into context for
this was invaluable.
Us.
I mean, honestly, Sophia should have hired you to help out as a consultant. Gosh.
I know.
I mean, I wouldn't have said no, but I also want to point out the history is important, but it's really about the clothes, people.
This movie is about the clothes. Yeah,
it's about the clothes and the hair. And the food.
Hair and the food, and the seeing Versailles.
Yeah. And it's lovely to see it, and you don't have to. If you had been there at the time, you wouldn't have wanted to be because the smell was absolutely unbearable. So that's why everybody wore lots of perfume. And you'll notice that when you've toured it, there are no toilets. Yes.
So what? They just
wherever? They have a little pot in the corner?
Sometimes there was a pot in the corner. Sometimes there was a screen, but sometimes there wasn't. They used to carry umbrellas in the courtyard, not because they were afraid it was going to rain. ...
Because someone would pee out the window?
Or they empty their chamber pots.
Oh.
Really?
Oh!
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah, it was a dirty, dirty place.
And I
So
also
that's
heard it was very, very cold. They told us on the tour that it was so
Yes.
cold that sometimes the wine would freeze in the glasses.
Yep. Well, they didn't have,
Speaking of privileged concerns.
they didn't have insulation back then
Yes.
as such.
Yeah.
You just put on another layer of silk.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at popthiscollective@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at pop this or on Instagram at, I think it's pop this too.
Yes.
I could be wrong because Andrea Warner usually says as part of the
Yes, she
dialogue.
does usually. At least
If
I
you
get to
put in-
just
If you put in "pop this" in the search field, something will come up.
Something will come up.
something.
And
it should
you'll
be us.
recognize it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks, as always, for all of you listening, and Andrea Gin for producing and hosting and putting this all together. And Stephen, thank you so much for,
my pleasure.
you're more than a fill-in to us. I'll tell you that much.
Yes, thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye.